ॐ शुक्लां भरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। अगजानन पद्मार्कं गजाननमहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानामेकदन्तमुपास्महे। श्रीमहागणपतये नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां पिशजे भवरोगिणां निधये सर्वविद्यानां श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां श्रीहयग्रीवमुपास्महे। श्रीहयग्रीवमूर्तये नमः। सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। श्रीमहासरस्वत्यै नमः। उमाकोमलहस्ताब्जसम्भावितललाटकं हिरण्यकुण्डलं वन्दे कुमारं पुष्करश्वशं। வெற்றிவேல் முருகனுக்கு ஹரஹரோஹரா. லோகவீரியம் மகாபூஜ்யம் சர்வரக்ஷாகரம் விபும் பார்வதி ஹிருதயானந்தம் சாஸ்தாரம் பிரணமாம்யகம். சுவாமியே சரணமையப்பா. வாகர்த்தாவிவ சம்பிரக்தௌ வாகர்த்த பிரதிபத்தயே जगदः पितरौ वन्दे पार्वती परमेश्वरौ। श्री पार्वती परमेश्वराभ्यां नमः। कोमलं कूजयन् वेणुं श्यामलोऽयं कुमारकः वेदवेद्यं परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। पीताम्बरं करविराजितचक्रशङ्खकौमोदकी सरसिजं करुणासमुद्रं राधासहायम् अतिसुन्दरमन्दहासं वातालयेशम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ते सदा। कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः। कृष्णादेव समुद्भवो मम विभो कृष्णस्य दासोऽस्म्यहं। कृष्णे भक्तिरचञ्चलास्तु भगवन् हे कृष्ण तुभ्यं नमः। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं नम्राणां सन्निधत्ते सततमपि पुरस्तैरनभ्यर्थितानपि अर्थान् कामानजस्रं वितरति परमानन्दसान्द्रां गतिं च। इत्थं निःशेषलभ्यो निरवधिकफलः पारिजातो हरे त्वं क्षुद्रं तं शक्रवाटी द्रुममभिलषति व्यर्थमर्त्यव्रजोऽयं। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं श्रीभट्टपादम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। वंशीविभूषितकरात् नवनीरदाभात् पीताम्बरात् अरुणबिम्बफलादरोष्टात् पूर्णेन्दुसुन्दरमुखात् अरविन्दनेत्रात् कृष्णात् परं किमपि तत्त्वमहं न जाने। കൈരണ്ടും കൂപ്പി ഞാൻ വീണ്ടുമീറക്കുന്നു നീരജലോചന നിന്നോടായി. ഇതീനു മഞ്ഞനെ കുംഭീടേണ്ടാത്തോരു രീതിയിൽ നീ എന്നെ പാലിക്കെന്നായി. കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ. Good morning, everyone. We'll actually just jump into the 93rd chapter because I want to see how much we can cover today. 93, maybe a little bit of 94 with some meanings as well. So, Vijay, you can be a student, and then Srividya, you can be a student. First half, okay. So this one is the 93 is the lessons from 25 guru. So what Bhattacharya has done is he's taken what various people have said, various enlightened people have said, and then he's kind of condensed it into what are the key takeaways that he's getting from those lessons. And the two things happen in just one some set of stanzas. He's just telling you what those lessons are, and in the majority of the other things, he's actually praying for those, right? That he also becomes like that. So that's what he's kind of trying now, because now he's going away from just pure bhakti to a level of enlightenment. If he has to renunciate everything and get enlightened, then what he has to do. So that's what majority of this chapter is going to be. So stanza one. बन्धुस्नेहं विजह्यां तव हि करुणया त्वय्युपावेशितात्मा सर्वं त्यक्त्वा चरेयं सकलमपि जगद्वीक्ष्य मायाविलासं नानात्वाद् भ्रान्तिजन्यात् सति खलु गुणदोषावबोधे विधिर्वा व्यासेधो वा कथं तौ त्वयि निहितमतेः बीतवैषम्य बुद्धेः. So he says the first step, like he says, is bandhu sneham. So attachment to family and friends. He says, I first have to get rid of that. He says the only thing, that main thing that holds everybody back to the path of realization is attachment to people, because that's what holds you back. So he says the first step, he says, is I want to be able to, with your grace, he says, with your blessings, I don't want to be too attached to my family and friends, because every time he says I'm attached to it, then I'm being held back. And by moving away from it, he says that now gives me complete, I want to renunciate everything and then move around freely. Because he says once I move around freely and constantly only think about you, then he says there's no concept of good and bad, because the concept of good and bad in anything is coming because we are thinking about us, we are thinking about ourselves or our family, what is the impact of something to something. But he says, but if you renounce everything and you don't care what you have, you don't care what the impact is, and you start seeing the Lord in everything, he says, then my mind can discriminate and says that there's nothing like good and bad, it is just you in everything. So he says, please get me to that point, that way I'm not affected by anything. Because that way, whether it rains or whether you get something you like or you get something you don't like, there's no such concept, because everything you're associating with the Lord, and that way I will not be impacted by anything and just thinking about you all the time. So bandhu sneham bijahyam tava hi karunaya, comma, tvayu paveshitatma. So that word is just one word, comma, sarvam tyaktva chareyam, comma, sakalamapi jagat vikshya maya vilasam. बन्धुस्नेहं विजह्यां तव हि करुणया त्वय्युपावेशितात्मा सर्वं त्यक्त्वा चरेयं सकलमपि जगद्वीक्ष्य मायाविलासम्.
बन्धुस्नेहं विजह्यां तव हि करुणया त्वय्युपावेशितात्मा सर्वं त्यक्त्वा चरेयं सकलमपि जगद्वीक्ष्य मायाविलासम्.
बन्धुस्नेहं विजह्यां तव हि करुणया. Take it till there continuously.
बन्धुस्नेहं विजह्यां तव हि करुणया त्वय्युपावेशितात्मा सर्वं त्यक्त्वा चरेयं सकलमपि जगद्वीक्ष्य मायाविलासम्.
बन्धुस्नेहं विजह्यां तव हि करुणया त्वय्युपावेशितात्मा सर्वं त्यक्त्वा चरेयं सकलमपि जगदीक्ष्य मायाविलासम्. बन्धुस्नेहं विजह्यां तव हि करुणया त्वय्युपावेशितात्मा सर्वं त्यक्त्वा चरेयं सकलमपि जगदीक्ष्य मायाविलासम्.
नानात्वाद् भ्रान्ति जन्यात्, कॉमा, सति खलु गुण दोषावबोधे विधिर्वा, कॉमा, व्यासेधो वा कथं तौ त्वयि निहित matehe. So after mate, there's a on top of the v there is a ir, remove that. Matehe visargan, comma, vita vaishamya buddhehe. नानात्वाद् भ्रान्तिजन्यात् सति खलु गुणदोषावबोधे विधिर्वा व्यासेधो वा कथं तौ त्वयि निहितमतेः बीतवैषम्यबुद्धेः।
नानात्वात् भ्रान्तिजन्यात् सति खलु गुणदोषावबोधे विदिर्वा व्यासेधो वा कथं तो त्वयि निहितमतेः वीतवैषम्यबुद्धेः। नानात्वात् भ्रान्तिजन्यात् सति खलु गुणदोषावबोधे विदिर्वा व्यासेधो वा कथं तो तौ त्वयि निहितमतेः वीतवैषम्यबुद्धेः।
नानात्वद्भ्रान्तिजन्यात् सति खलु गुणदोषावबोधे विधिर्वा व्यासेधो वा कथं तौ त्वयि निहितमतेः वीतवैषम्यबुद्धेः। नानात्वाद्भ्रान्तिजन्यात् सति खलु गुणदोषावबोधे विधिर्वा व्यासेधो वा कथं तौ त्वयि निहितमतेः वीतवैषम्यबुद्धेः।
Stanza 2. So I'll say the meaning first and then we'll break it up. So here in the stanza, in this, he says, so he's kind of talking about that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You guys know that pyramid that he has, which he says at the very bottom are the people who primarily care about the basic necessities, which is, do I have food? Do I have a place to stay? Can I get water? Can I get air? This is the lowest of the beings. That's all they care about. Then comes the beings which are slightly on top, which are more concerned about preserving their life. So now then they start getting a level of intelligence that they have to now make sure that I'm not getting killed. And then you go into a set of creatures who now have some sort of relationships with each other, right? So even the dogs also are mature because they all have relationships with each other. And then the human thing, when it comes, is once you have that, then you care about, am I in a good position and all that. And then finally, when you have everything you need, then you start thinking about other things, right? So he says there are a lot of creatures like that who are in the bottom of that hierarchical needs. He says, first of all, the biggest benefit I have right now, he says, is I am born as a human because I can now discriminate between what is good and what is bad. If somebody is just purely focused on surviving, they are not going to discriminate between good and bad because they have to survive. So he says, I now am best as a human, so I have this information. Then he says, for me as a human, or for all of us as a humans, mind is the only thing which can decide which way we want to go. It's purely on the mind. He says, if the mind is now focused on how do I devote myself to you so I can get liberated, then all the activities I am going to do are going to be that way. But the same mind can also be an enemy because it might make me want other things which will distract me. So he's saying that thanks for giving me this life as a human. Now please bless so that my mind remains focused on always being devoted to you. That way I can use it as my friend rather than as an enemy. क्षुतृष्णा लोप मात्रे सतत कृत धियो जंतवः put is santhyanantaha, put a visarga at the end and comma santhyanantaha. Next line, that is goes away. Tebhyo vijnana vatvat purusha iha varaha, again remove that is visarga comma tat janir durlabhaiva. So this is human life which is durlabham, which is very difficult to get. क्षुतृष्णालोपमात्रे सततकृतधियो जन्तवः सन्त्यनन्ताः तेभ्यो विज्ञानवत्वात् पुरुष इह वरः तज्जनिर्दुर्लभैव.
क्षुतृष्णालोपमात्रे सतकृतधियो जन्तवः सन्त्यनन्ताः तेभ्यो विज्ञानवत्वात् पुरुष इह वरः तज्जनिर्दुर्लभैव. क्षुतृष्णालोपमात्रे सततकृतधियो जन्तवः सन्त्यनन्ताः तेभ्यो विज्ञानवत्वात् पुरुष इह वरः तज्जनिर्दुर्लभैव.
क्षुतृष्णालोपमात्रे सततकृतधियो जन्तवः सन्त्यनन्ताः तेभ्यो विज्ञानवत्वात् पुरुष इह वरः तज्जनिर्दुर्लभैव. क्षुतृष्णालोपमात्रे सततकृतधियो जन्तवः सन्त्यनन्ताः तेभ्यो विज्ञानवत्वात् पुरुष इह वरः तज्जनिर्दुर्लभैव.
The first line after lopa matre the comma is there. Okay, I think you are breaking it after satata.
Okay.
Tatrapyatmatmana, that kind of comes together. Tatrapyatmatmanaha put a is. Syat suhrudapi cha ripuhu. Put a visarga there and comma after ripuhu. Then you remove the ir that comes next. Yastvai nyasta chetaha. So again visarga and comma there at the end of that line. Next line, if you have is, that goes away. Tapo chitte rupayam स्मरति सहि सुहृत् कॉमा स्वात्म वैरी तथोन्यः तत्राप्यात्मात्मनः स्यात् सुहृदपि च रिपुः यस्त्वहि न्यस्तचेताः तापोच्छित्तेरुपायं स्मरति सहि सुहृत् स्वात्म वैरी तथोन्यः.
Ajay, ஒரு question. அந்த first இல்ல தத்ராப்யாத்மாத்மனஸ் ரெண்டு ஈஸ்வரமா?
ஆமா, மாத் மனஹா இருக்கு இல்லையா, அதுக்கு ஒரு இஸ் வந்துடுறது. Then the next word is syat, that has a is too.
So அப்ப ஒரு கமா போடணுமா இல்ல அப்படியே தான்
இல்ல
படிக்கணும்?
it will go continuously. Tatrapyatmatmanas syat, it will just go continuously.
Okay, got it.
तत्राप्यात्मात्मनः स्यात् सुहृदपि च रिपुः यस्त्वयि न्यस्तचेताः तापोच्छित्तेरुपाय स्मरति स हि सुहृत् स्वात्मवैरी ततोऽन्यः. ट्यून् पैट. तत्राप्यात्मात्मनः स्यात् सुहृदपि च रिपुः यस्त्वयि न्यस्तचेताः तापोच्छित्तेरुपायं स्मरति स हि सुहृत् स्वात्मवैरी ततोऽन्यः.
तत्राप्यात्मात्मनः स्यात् सुहृदपि च रिपुः यस्त्वयि न्यस्तचेताः तापोच्छित्तेरुपायं स्मरति स हि सुहृत् स्वात्मवैरी ततोऽन्यः. तत्राप्यात्मात्मनः स्यात् सुहृदपि च रिपुः यस्त्वयि न्यस्तचेताः तापोच्छित्तेरुपायं स्मरति स हि सुहृत् स्वात्मवैरी ततोऽन्यः.
Stanza 3. So in stanza 3 he's saying that the world that you have is going to teach me a lot of lessons, and next several things he's going to give a lot of examples, right? So first he says the earth, bhumi. So he says this bhumi, no matter what people are doing to it, so some people are digging it, some people are making it dirty, so of course there are internal climate impact and everything, but he says the earth continues to do its duty, which is spinning, and it keeps going around. So he says, from that, let me learn forbearance, or let me learn, patience and my focus, let persistence. Let me not get distracted by all of that. So that is one lesson he says. I want to learn from the bhumi itself. Second, he says is the wind. So the wind, while it is actually blowing, it is coming in contact with a lot of items. It's coming in contact with a lot of dirt, lot of junk and everything. But then it just keeps going, right? It just keeps flowing. It doesn't stop. It doesn't whine, or it doesn't complain about gathering dirt. It still moves on, and it purifies itself. So similarly, he says, when I come in contact with a lot of things which are unnecessary and which are impure, give me the strength to be able to discard all those and then remain pure all the way. So the Mother, he then goes on to compare, and then he says the third thing he says is space, which is there everywhere. So let me also realize that I want to be there. I'll consider you being everywhere and you being part of me and all that. So he says these are the lessons that nature you have created is going to teach me, and I want to remain committed that way, not get affected by anything else, essentially. Tvat karunhe pravritte ka iva nahi guruhu. Put a visarga there and comma. Says all of these things are guru to me. Nahi guruhu, comma. Next, on top of the lo, if you have a ir, you can remove it. Loka vrittepi bhuman, comma. Sarva krantapi bhumir nahi chalati tataha. Again, visarga and comma, remove that is. Sat kshamam shikshayeyam. त्वत्कारुण्ये प्रवृत्ते कैव न हि गुरुः लोकवृत्तेऽपि भूमन् सर्वाक्रान्तापि भूमिर्न हि चलति ततः सत्क्षमां शिक्षयेयम्.
त्वत्कारुण्ये प्रवृत्ते क इव न हि गुरुः लोकवृत्तेऽपि भूमन् सर्वक्रान्तापि भूमिर्न हि चलति ततः तत्क्षमां शिक्षयेयम्. त्वत्कारुण्ये प्रवृत्ते क इव न हि गुरुः लोकवृत्तेऽपि भूमन् सर्वाक्रान्तापि भूमिर्न हि चलति ततः सत्क्षमां शिक्षयेयम्.
त्वत्कारुण्ये प्रवृत्ते क इव न हि गुरुः लोकवृत्तेऽपि भूमन् सर्वाक्रान्तापि भूमिर्न हि चलति ततः सत्क्षमां शिक्षयेयम्. त्वत्कारुण्ये प्रवृत्ते क इव न हि गुरुः लोकवृत्तेऽपि भूमन् सर्वाक्रान्तापि भूमिर्न हि चलति ततः साक्षमां शिक्षयेयम्.
And the second line, last word, sat kshamam. I think we said sat kshamam.
सत्क्षमम्.
Yeah. Grinniyam isha, comma, tad vishaya परिचयेप्य प्रसक्तिम समीरात, कॉमा, व्याप्तत वंचात्मनो में, कॉमा, गगन गुरु वशात् भातु निर्लेपता च. गृह्णीयामीश तत्तत् विषय परिचयेप्य प्रसक्तिम समीरात व्याप्तत वंचात्मनो में गगन गुरु वशात् भातु निर्लेपता च.
गृह्णीयामीश तत्तद्विषय परिचयेप्य प्रसक्तिं समीरात् व्याप्तत्वं चात्मनो मे गगन गुरुवशात् भातु निर्लेप्ता च. गृह्णीयामीश तत्तद्विषय परिचयेप्य प्रसक्तिं समीरात् व्याप्तत्वं चात्मनो मे गगन गुरुवशात् भातु निर्लेपता च.
गृह्णीयामीश तत्तद्विषय परिचयेप्य प्रसक्तिं समीरात् व्याप्तत्वं चात्मनो मे गगन गुरुवशात् भातु निर्लेपता च.
And the fourth line, first word, and even Vijay, you also, I think you said vyaptat vam chat. So one in sound has to come there.
One, okay.
N sound has to come there. Yeah.
गृह्णीयामीश तत्तद्विषय परिचयेप्य प्रसक्तिं समीरात् व्याप्तत्वं चात्मनो मे गगन गुरुवशात् भातु निर्लेपता चे.
Patacha. Stanza 4. So here, he's giving multiple examples. So one, he says, and he's requesting, right, praying here, saying that number one, he's comparing to all the elements. He says, like rainwater, like water. He says, I want to be pure. I don't want to be tainted with anything. I want to be pure like water. Next, he says like fire, and this is the most important one, where he says like fire, no matter what you put into the fire consumes it, and the fire continues to burn. Like no matter whether you put rice into it or you put dal, whatever it is, it just consumes it. It's not affected. So, and this is the important thing, because the food, right? Like we are so we have preferences of what we like, what we don't like. So I don't know if Sri Ram knows the story of Mahapariva, right? Like one day somebody gave him, like he gave him katrika something, so he liked it, and so he ended up asking who made this or something like that. So the moment he asked us, and of course he's such a realized person, he felt that the fact he asked itself is wrong, because the fact that he liked it means now he's getting attached to it and he wants to know who made it, and then he's going to expect it tomorrow. So he then went on a fast for a week or something to get that feeling out of his mind. So that's a level of detachment, or the state of detachment one needs to get to. So which is what Bhadrapati is saying, is I should not have preferences for what I like and what I don't like, and I should be like fire. Whatever you give, I will eat, right? And then I'll consume it. So that is the example he's giving for fire. And then he says, just like how various pieces of wood you put into the fire, it eventually burns. So, but that's because it's got the burning fuel inside of the wood. So let me also come to the realization that everything that I am seeing has you inside of it. I might not know, but everything has you inside of it. Just like every piece of wood has a fuel in there. So when you put it into the fire, it actually burns. And then he gives the example of the moons. He says, while when I look at the moon, I see the waxing and the waning of the moon. But that doesn't necessarily mean the moon is actually changing the shape. It is just appearing to me like that. So he says, similarly, let me also realize that whatever is happening to my body, today my body is healthy, tomorrow my body might go through various things. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, just like how the moon itself is a constant, the Atma inside me is a constant. So Almari is giving all the various things and praying to the Lord. These are all what the other gurus have said, and let me also get to that level of realization. So Swachhaha is there. Putta is Swachhasyam Pavanoham, comma, Madhura Udaka Vrit Vanni Vanma Sma Grihnam, comma, Sarvan Ninopi Dosham, comma, Tarushu Tamiva Mam Sarva Bhuteshvaveyam. स्वच्छस्यां पावनोऽहं मधुर उदकवत् वह्निवन्मास्म घृणां सर्वाहीनोऽपि दोषं तरुषु तमिव मां सर्वभूतेष्वभेयाम्.
स्वच्छस्यां पावनोऽहं मधुर उदकवद् वह्निवन्मास्म गृह्णां सर्वान्नीनोऽपि दोषं तरसु तमिव मां सर्वभूतेष्वभेयाम्.
Vijay, and the second line, tarushu tamiva mam. Yeah.
Okay. स्वच्छस्यां पावनोऽहं मधुर उदकवद् वह्निवन्मास्म गृह्णां सर्वान्नीनोऽपि दोषं तरुषु तमिव मां सर्वभूतेष्वभेयाम्.
स्वच्छस्यां पावनोऽहं मधुर उदकवद् वह्निवन्मास्म गृह्णां सर्वान्नीनोऽपि दोषं तरुषु तमिव मां सर्वभूतेष्वभेयाम्. स्वच्छस्यां पावनोऽहं मधुर उदकवद् वह्निवन्मास्म गृह्णां सर्वान्नीनोऽपि दोषं तरुषमिव मां सर्वभूतेष्वभेयाम्.
Pushtir nashtihi, put ich sound nashtih kalanam shashina eva tanoho. So visarga there and comma. Next line, that ir goes away. Natmanostiti vidyam. So that's one word. Natmanostiti vidyam, comma. Toyadi vyasta martanda vadapi cha, comma. Tanushvekatam tvat prasadat. पुष्टिर्नष्टिकलानां शशिन इव तनोः नात्मनोऽस्तीति विद्यां तोयादिव्यस्तमार्ताण्डवदपि च तनुष्वेकतां त्वत्प्रसादात्.
पुष्टिर्नष्टिकलानां शशिन इव तनोः नात्मनोऽस्तीति विद्यां तोयादिव्यस्तमार्ताण्डवदपि च तनुष्वेकतां त्वत्प्रसादात्. पुष्टिर्नष्टिकलानां शशिन इव तनोः नात्मनोऽस्तीति विद्यां तोयादिव्यस्तमार्ताण्डवदपि च तनुष्वेकतां त्वत्प्रसादात्.
ராஜேஷ், அந்த புஷ்டிர் நிஷ்டிஹி கிடையாதா?
Nashti.
சாரி, நஷ்டிஹி இல்ல, அங்க காமா
And
கிடையாது.
ich sound comes. H. Nashti
காமா இருக்கு இல்லையா அங்க?
இல்ல அங்க இல்ல. पुष्टिर्नष्टिः कलानां शशिनैव तनोः
Okay.
तनोः कपनं
पुष्टिर्नष्टिः कलानां शशिन इव तनोः नात्मनोऽस्ति विद्यां तोया दिव्यस्तमार्ताण्डवदपि च तनुष्वेकतां त्वत्प्रसादात् पुष्टिर्नष्टिः कलानां शशिन इव तनोः नात्मनोऽस्तीति विद्यां तोया दिव्यस्तमार्ताण्डवदपि च तनुष्वेकतां त्वत्प्रसादात्.
stanza 5. So even stanza 5 also it goes through a couple of examples. So one he says that he gives the example of, and it depends on how you want to take this example, but he gives the example of one of the pigeons child which the hunter traps into the nest, into the net. So now the pigeon, if the pigeon also goes to try to recover its baby, what's happening is the pigeon is also getting caught because that is the hunter's intention. So he captures he captures the baby, and then the pigeon goes. The pigeon also gets caught into the net. So like he said in the beginning, bandhu sneham vijagyam, he says, I don't want to get attached, because if I get attached to my bandhus, then I'm also going to become like the pigeon who's going to get trapped into that, right, of taking care and all that, and then I will never get liberated. I'm already always in this constant cycle of attachment with my kith and kin. So he says, let me not get that attachments to any of these things. Second, I think this eating example comes again where he says, I want to be like a python, which means a python is just lying there. Whatever comes its way, it eats, and then it just lies. It doesn't go in hunt for food. So similarly, let me just be wherever I am, and whatever food comes my way, let me just eat that. And some days I may not get anything also, which is also okay, in which case I will end up starving, but I'm not going to go looking for food. And then third example he gives is just like how this moth flies into the fire and burns itself. So being a man, he says, let me not get attracted to women, because that is going to then deviate me out of my path of getting liberated. So I do not want to get influenced by anything. And then just like a bee, there's a fourth example he gives where a bee is hopping from flower to flower. It is only gathering the nectar it actually needs. It's taking the essence out of everything. So similarly, he says, everything I'm studying and doing, let me just take the essence out of it, and not but at the same time, it says there are some bees which are sitting in a flower, like there are some flowers which close, like in the sunflower, daytime when the sun rises it opens, then it closes itself. But if a bee is sitting for too long inside the flower, it is going to get trapped into the flower and die. So he says, I don't want to get trapped into accumulating things that way. I want to take the essence and keep moving on. So the Mari, he's giving various life lessons and says, give me these things, that way I'm not attached. At the end of the day, he says, I don't want to be attached to anything, because he says that is the root cause of all the misery here. Snehat vyadhata putra pranaya mrita kapothayito ma sma bhuvam. So the entire line is together, comma at the very end. Praptam prashnan saheya kshudamapi shayuvat, comma सिन्धुवत् श्यामगाधः. स्नेहाद्व्याधातपुत्रप्रणयमृतकपोथायितो मास्म भुवं प्राप्तं प्राश्नन् सहेयक्षुदमपि शयुवत् सिन्धुवत् श्यामगाधः.
स्नेहात् व्यादात्त पुत्र प्रणयमृत कपोतायितो मास्म भुवं प्राप्तं प्राश्नन् सहेयक्षुदमपि शयुवत् सिन्धुवत्यामगाधः. स्नेहात् व्यादत्त पुत्र प्रणयमृत कपोतायितो मास्म भुवं प्राप्तं प्राश्नन् सहेयक्षुदमपि शयुवत् सिन्धुवत्यामगाधः.
Rajesh, ஒரு question.
ராஜேஷ் கொஸ்டின்
கேளுங்க.
இன்னொரு தடவை சொல்றீங்களா? இந்த வியாதா புத்திர வியசன மிருதன் இருக்கு, அது இன்னொரு தடவை சொல்றீங்களா?
ஓகே. ஸ்னேஹாத் வியாதாத்த, வியாதாத்த
இஸ் இல்லையாங்க?
இல்ல,
எங்க இஸ் வந்து போட்டுட்டு இருக்குது.
சாரி, நீங்க சொல்லுங்க.
வியாதாத்த டபுள் தா வருது. வியாதாத்த
ஓ வியாதாத்த.
புத்திர pranaya mrita.
Pranay Vyasanamrudan with the Putra Vyasanamrudan vandirke.
You may have to change it then. I don't know why. Nobody. Huh?
எனக்கும் இதே தான் இருக்கு.
Okay.
தாஸ்த புத்திர வியசன மிருதான் தான் இருக்கு.
Okay, just change it to, I don't know what that, just change it to pranaya. That vyasana that you have, change it to pranaya. So putra pranaya mrita kapotayito.
That should have been.
Pranaya mrida.
Mrita, ama.
So vyadhat is vyadhat.
Vyadhat. Let me just type it here. Okay, hold on.
Vyadhat artharka.
Snehat. Snehat. Vyadhat.
Vyadhat.
Putra pranaya mrita. I just typed it there. Close enough to some extent. Mrita kapotayito. So that you have the same, right?
Full up சொல்லிடுங்களேன் அந்த
Okay.
first
So,
two lines.
Snehat vyadhat putra pranaya mrita kapotayito ma sma bhuvam, praptam prashnan saheya kshudamapi shayuvat, sindhuvat syamagadaha.
Thank you.
Okay, I put the first portion in the chat also.
स्नेहाव्यादत्त पुत्रप्रणयमृतकपोतायितो मास्म भुवं प्राप्तं प्राश्नन् सहेयक्षुधमपि शयुवत् सिन्धुवत् श्यामगाधः स्नेहाव्यादत्त
Vyadhat, sorry, Shividya, Vyadhat.
Sorry. स्नेहाव्याधात् पुत्रप्रणयमृतकपोतायितो मास्म भुवं प्राप्तं प्रश्नन् सहेयक्षुधमपि शयुवत सिन्धुवत् श्यामगाधः.
And then my second line, second word, prashnan. You said prashnan. Prashnan. Ma paptam yoshi dadhau shikhini shalabhavat, bhringavat sara bhagi bhuyasam. So put a plus at the end of that line and comma after bhuyasam. So one comma after shalabhavat, one comma after bhuyasam. Kintu tad vad dhana chayana vashan maham isha pranesham. Ma paptam yoshidadhau shikini shalabhavat bhringavat sarabhagi bhuyasam kintu tadvad dhanachayena vashan mahamisha pranesham.
Ma paptam yoshidadho shikhini shalabhavat bhringavat sarabhagi bhuyasam kintu tatvat dhanachayana vashan mahamisha pranesham. Ma paptam yoshidadho shikhini shalabhavat bhringavat sarabhagi bhuyasam kintu tatvat dhanachayana vashat mahamisha tatvat dhanachayana vashan mahamisha pranesham.
Ma paptam yoshidadau shikhini shalabhavat bhringavat sarabhagi bhuyasam kintu tatvat dhanachayan vasha mahamisha pranesham. Ma paptam yoshidadau shikhini shalabhavat bhringavat sarabhagi bhuyasam kintu tatvat dhanachayan vashat mahamisha pranesham.
And the end of the third line, you just stretch it a little bit, right? Then you'll land. For example, bhringavat sarabhagi bhuyasam kintu tadvad dhanachayana vashan mahamisha pranesham. Okay, so just stretch it a little bit at the third line, then it'll land.
ராஜேஷ் ஒரே ஒரு இது எண்ட்ல வந்து தனச்சயன வஷாத்னு இருக்கு பட்
Yeah.
வஷான்னு நீங்க
Yeah,
சொல்றீங்க இல்லையா?
because the vashat is the word, okay,
Mm.
but then ma is coming next, right? When it is there and ma comes next and you write it together, it becomes a in.
Okay.
So that is the right original word is it only, but it has to be said as a in because ma comes next.
Okay. Thanks.
So stanza 6. So stanza 6 also is kind of continuing with the previous line theme. He says that the way they capture a male elephant is they first capture a female elephant, and then they put the female elephant somewhere. The male gets attracted to the female, and it ends up coming there. So andamari since they capture it that way, he says, let me not also get attracted, right, and then get distracted in my idea. Second is the bees collect all the honey for themselves and then they store it all and then somebody else comes and takes all that honey away, right? So he says similarly, let me not get sucked into this way of accumulating wealth only for all my wealth to be completely taken away by somebody else at the end of the day. So now let me not get attached into that wealth creation. And another, he just gives a lot of examples. Then the fish, how you can give a bait to a fish, right? So anamari with food, I don't want to get baited into liking something, just like how a fish can be caught with the help of a bait. Ademari talks about another bird called kurara bird, which I don't know, but where that bird is gathering the meat, but all the other birds end up taking it away from the kurara bird, that when it although it goes and gathers. So essentially he says, I don't want to say like the same concept, I don't want to get baited or tricked by all these various things, right? At the end of which, all of which is a trap. That's what for all of these examples, it's a trap. That's what they all fall into. Ma badhyasam tarunya gaja iva vashaya, comma, narjayeyam dhanaugham, comma, hartan yastam hi madvihara iva, comma, mrigavanma muham gramya geetaihi. मा बध्यासं तरुण्या गज इव वशया नार्जयेयं दनौघं हर्तान्यस्तं हि माद्वीहर इव मृगवन्मामुहं ग्राम्यगीतैः.
मा भध्यासं तरुण्या गज इव वशया नार्जयेयं धनौघं हर्तान्यस्तं हि माद्वीहर इव मृगवन्मामुहं ग्राम्यगीतैः. मा भध्यासं तरुण्या गज इव वशया नार्जयेयं धनौघं हर्तान्यस्तं हि माद्वीहर इव मृगवन्मामुहं ग्रामय गीतैः.
And the gram im sound, so gramya geetaihi.
Oh, gramya geetaihi. Okay.
मा भत्यासं तरुणया गजैव वशया नार्जयेयं धनौघं हर्तान्यस्तं हि माध्वीहरैव मृगवन्मामुहं ग्राम्यगीतैः. मा भद्यासं तरुणया गजैव
Tarunya, sorry, Shivita, another tarunya.
मा भद्यासं तरुण्या गजैव वशया नर्जयेयं धनौघं हर्तान्यस्तं हि माध्वीहरैव मृगवन्मामुहं ग्राम्यगीतैः.
And the first line, narjayeyam. Narjayeyam, okay.
நார்ஜெயம்.
ராஜேஷ்,
Ah.
புறாராங்கிறது வந்து ஈகிள் மாதிரி ஒரு பறவை.
Abdiya, okay. So that goes and collects the meat first.
மீட்
Oh, okay.
ஸ்கேவெஞ்சர்.
Okay. So and then everybody goes, it collects the meat and everybody else goes and takes it away from it, probably. Okay.
ஆமா.
Okay. Nathya sajjeya bhojye jasha iva balishe, comma, pingala van nirashaha is there. Put a plus and then put a is to join it. So pingala van nirashas supyam bhartavya yogat, comma, kurara iva vibho samishonyair na hantyei. Samishonyair na hanyei. Nathya sajjeya bhojye jasha iva balishe पिङ्गलावन्निराशस्सुप्यां भर्तव्ययोगात् कुरर इव विभो सामिशोऽन्यैर्न हन्यै
Rajesh, இது Badiseva, Baliseva. The first third line.
Balishe. Balishe.
Balishe. Okay.
Yeah,
In the
Bali. Bali is like a bead.
Okay. Okay. In the Badishe. Okay.
Sorry, நீங்க Balishe. First ba li she.
Okay.
இங்க படிஷேன் இருக்கு.
Oh, okay.
Badishe இருக்கு அதனால. Okay.
பாலிஷ்.
नात्या सञ्जयेय भोज्ये जश इव बलिशे पिङ्गलावन्निराशः सुप्त्यां भर्तव्ययोगात् कुरर इव विभो सामिशोऽन्यैर्न हन्यै नात्या सज्जेय भोज्ये जश इव बलिशे पिङ्गलावन्निराशः सुप्त्यां भर्तव्ययोगात् कुरर इव विभो सामिशोर्यैर्न हन्यै.
இல்ல அந்த last portion, right? That Samisho Anye is there, but it has that S symbol. So you kind of you say the whole thing together, right? Samishonyair na Hanyai.
Samishonyairna hanyai. Samishonyairna hanyai. Okay.
Yeah, and the ir comes after the yai. Yeah.
नात्या सज्जेय भोज्ये झष इव बलिशे पिङ्गलावन्निराशः सुप्यां भर्तव्ययोगात् कुरर इव विभो सामिशोऽन्यैर्न हन्यै नात्या सज्जेय भोज्ये झष इव बलिशे पिङ्गलावन्निराशः सुप्यां भर्तव्ययोगात् कुरर इव विभो सामिशोऽन्यैर्न हन्यै.
Rajesh, ஒரே ஒரு quick question.
Pingala
வந்து last week we discussed, right? ஒரு Pingala அது வேற இது வேற. Pingala.
Ama, this is different.
Okay.
So this I don't know, and I don't know exactly what this meaning of this Pingala is.
Okay.
Okay. But I'll check and find out. That's why I didn't give that explanation. And the word in the meaning, I don't know what that is representing here.
I think the Srimad Bhagavatam வருது. Maybe I can go and check there.
Yeah, please, post it if you can. Yeah.
Okay.
ராஜேஷ் இந்த பிரபத்திலையும் படிஷேன் போட்டிருக்கு.
அப்படியா? நாங்க the previous batch also nobody corrected it, so we kept it as Balishe.
Actually, Telugu also it says Badishe, Rajesh Garu.
No, Balishe, right?
Telugu D.
Badishe.
D is the letter D.
Okay, let me see what is the meaning of the word Badishe.
Badishe,
in Sanskrit is. And the meaning, it's not showing up in the Sanskrit text Badishe.
Okay.
So I'll check. Okay, I'll anyway check in the Sanskrit dictionary to say what Badishe means, because Balishe here bhojya, so it's like the food, right? Like a Balishe, so it's like used as a bait. That's what it is. He's giving the example of the fish, how you can catch the fish by using another food as a bait. So that's why that food is sacrificed, right? So that's why the word Balishe is making sense here, but I don't know what the meaning of Badishe is. So let me check on that. And okay, so stanza 7. So here also like few examples, right? So he says first like a shishu, like Sukhamati shishu. So if you think of a small child, I don't maybe 1 or 2 years child, right? That child doesn't have the concept of honor or dishonor, right? It just goes around. You can, it doesn't feel the need for a honor or dishonor like all of us do. So he says it is living happily. It has its own requirements, but it's not bound by the honors or honor and dishonor. He says similarly, let me also be that. No, you can tell me what you want. I'm not going to get impacted. I'm not going to want honor, or I'm not going to get affected by dishonor. So that is one example he's asking for. Second, he says just like in this case, he says Kanyaya Ekashesho Valaya. So if there's a maiden who's going around with only one bangle in her hand, that bangle doesn't have other accompanying bangles to talk with. Only when you have multiple bangles next to each other, they all make noise because they cling against each other. So he says, similarly, let me not be in a group, because the moment he says I'm in a group, then I will only be having conversations, I'll have relationship issues, all that things. So let me remain alone. That way I'm not impacted by any of these other things that happen when noise of any noise that might come from all the discussions. And he goes on, and then he also says, eventually at the very end, he says, just like a snake, how it lives in the house made by rats, let me also go live wherever I get a chance. So previously he gave the example of a python which is just sitting, and whatever food comes its way he's eating. Similarly, he says, I don't want any possessions, I don't want a house or anything, let me just go stay wherever I get a place to stay and not be bound by any of those possessions. Again, all of these, he says, will be required so that he can get to the state of liberation, right? So if we are not in that state, then this will not make sense for us. Varteya tyaktamanaha, sukhamati shishu van nissahayash chareyam, kanyaya ekashesho valaya iva vibho, varjitanyonya ghoshaha. Vartehyत्यक्तमानः सुखमतिशिशुवन् निस्सहायश्चरेयम् कन्याया एकशेषो वलय इव विभो वर्जितान्योन्यघोषः.
Varteya tyaktamanaha sukamati shishuvan nissahayascareyam kanyaya ekashesho balaya iva vibho varjitanyonya ghoshaha. Varteya tyaktamanaha sukhamati shishuvan nissahayascareyam kanyaya ekashesho balaya iva vibho Varjitanyonya ghoshaha.
वर्तेयत्यक्तमानः सुखमतिशिशुवन् निस्सहायश्चरेयम् कन्याया एकशेषो वलय इव विभो वर्जितान्योन्यकोशः. वर्तेयत्यक्तमानः सुखमतिशिशुवन् निस्सहायश्चरेयम् कन्याया एकशेषो वलय इव विभो वर्जितान्योन्यकोशः.
त्वच चित्तो नाव बुद्ध्यै, परमिषु कृदिव क्षमा बृधायान घोषम. That is not kshama, it's a ksha, right? It's only half. So kshma bridayana ghosham, geheshvanya praniteshu. So the ish and va you have, remove that, put a shu, praniteshu, next word starts with the a, ahiriva nivasan yundaror. That's one word, nivasan yundaror mandireshu. Tvachitto navabuddhye paramishu kridiva kshma bhridayana ghosham geheshvanya praniteshu ahiriva nivasan yundaror mandireshu.
Tvachitto nava buddhyai paramishu kridiva kshmabrita ghosham geheshvanya praniteshu ahiriva nivasan yundharor mandireshu. Tvachitto nava buddhyai paramishu kridiva kshmabrita ghosham geheshvanya praniteshu ahiriva nivasan yunduror mandireshu.
त्वच्चित्तो नावबुद्ध्यै परमिषु कृदिव क्ष्माभृदायानघोषम् गेहेष्वन्यप्रणीतेषु अहिरिव निवसान्युद्धरोर्मन्दिरेषु. त्वच्चित्तो नावबुद्ध्यै परमिषु कृदिव क्ष्माभृदायानघोषम् गेहेष्वन्यप्रणीतेषु अहिरिव निवसान्युद्धरो मंदिरेषु.
Okay, we'll switch after.
Pingala பார்த்தேன். So அது என்னன்னா, so she's a prostitute who will wait for வரவாளுக்கு. So அப்போ வந்து when she will think, okay, Baravala, they are not very rich and they don't have money. So she was thinking that she will get a better rate later. So finally at the end, she did not get anything at all. So she was thinking, because I was getting attached to that money and I did not get anything. So I should not get attached to anything. And Vairagyam, then she finally attained moksha. So we should not get attached to
Attach and be free from desire and everything. Yeah, I think that's yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Shubhadra.
No worries.
Okay, so we'll switch now. Kalpana, you can be a student, and Sangeeta, you can be a student. Okay, stanza 8. So in stanza 8, so he's kind of saying a couple of examples here. So he says, just like how when a spider is spinning its web, the thread for spinning the web is coming from the spider itself, and eventually the spider can also absorb all the thread. So he says, let that give me a reminder that the entire world is coming out of you, O Lord, and at the time of pralaya, when everything ends, everything is getting absorbed back into you. So he's kind of drawing the parallel with the spider and say, let that constantly remind me that everything has come out of you and everything eventually is going to go into you. And the second, when this beetle example he gives there, where when the larva is developing, so it actually brings it to its nest or the hole, and then it constantly keeps knocking and when it or tapping, and that tapping noise, that larva is worried that this particular beetle is tapping on its outside. It constantly keeps thinking about it, and that's when it's able to come out of it and become into another beetle. So he says, similarly, I want you to be constantly knocking on me and I want to be constantly thinking about you. So just like how this larva becomes a beetle, I can eventually attain your form and I can eventually merge into you. For that, please give me that blessing so I can constantly keep thinking about you as well. And he just gives some of those examples here. So Tvayeva Tvat Kritam Tvam, Kshapayasi Jagadit Yurna Nabhat. So that is one word. Jagadit Yurna Nabhat Pratiyam, Twach Chinta Twat Swarupam Kuruta Iti, Dhridam Shikshaye Peshakarat. त्वय्येव त्वत्कृतं त्वं क्षपयसि जगदित्यूर्णनाभात् प्रतीह्यां त्वच्चिन्ता त्वत्स्वरूपं कुरुत इति दृढं शिक्षये पेशकारात्.
त्वय्येव त्वत्कृतं त्वं क्षपयसि जगदित्यूर्णनाभात् प्रतीयां त्वच्चिन्ता त्वत्स्वरूपं कुरुत इति दृढं शिक्षये पेशकारात्. त्वय्येव त्वत्कृतं त्वं क्षमपयसि जगदित्यूर्णनाभात् प्रतीयां त्वच्चिन्ता त्वत्स्वरूपं कुरुत इति दृढं शिक्षये पेशकारात्.
त्वय्येव त्वत्कृतं त्वं क्षपयसि जगति यूननाभात् प्रतीयां तच्चिन्ता त्वत्स्वरूपं कुरुत इति दृढं शिक्षये पेशकारात्.
Sangeeta, second line, first word, twach. You said touch. Twachinta.
Twach, okay. त्वय्येव त्वत्कृतं त्वं क्षपयसि जगति यूर्णनाभात् प्रतीयां त्वच्चिन्ता त्वत्स्वरूपं कुरुत इति दृढं शिक्षये पेशकारात्.
Bid bhasmatma cha deho, bhavati guruvaro yo vivekam viraktim, dhatte sanchintya mano, mama tu bahu ruja piditoyam visheshat. Vidbhasmatma cha deho bhavati guruvaro yo vivekam viraktim dhatte sanchintya-mano mama tu bahurucha piditoyam visheshat.
विद्भस्मात्मा च देहो भवति गुरुवरो यो विवेकं विरक्तिं दत्ते संचिन्त्यमानो मम तु बहुरुजा पीडितोऽयं विशेषात्. विद्भस्मात्मा च देहो भवति गुरुवरो यो विवेकं विरक्तिं दत्ते संचिन्त्यमानो मम तु बहुरुजा पीडितोऽयं विशेषात्.
Rajesh, fourth line la comma irka.
After sanchinthyamano.
Okay. Vidbhasmatma cha deho bhavati guruvaro yo vivekam viraktim datte sancintyamano mamatu bahuruja piditoyam visheshat. Vidbhasmatma cha deho bhavati guruvaro yo vivekam viraktim datte sancintyamano mamatu bahuruja piditoyam visheshat.
Stanza 9. So stanza 9, he starts again with he may deha moham. He says again, attachment to the body. He says this is the number one reason, like we also discussed even earlier also. He says this attachment to the physical body that I have is what is now getting me attached to various things, because I want to take care of my body, which means I now want to wear good clothes. So all of that, and then and then physical things as well, right? So that's the thing he says primarily, which are now binding me to all the possessions I have, and also binding me to all the relationships I'm having, is my body. That's what is the primary problem. And because of that, he says, I'm not able to think about you. That's number one. And says this one, finally, when you die, he says, Vanne Shunaha. It's only the body is worthless. It's only going to go into fire. It's worth for the fire to burn, or it is for dogs to consume it. He says his body is of absolutely no use once you die. So, but when you're alive, this body is getting attached to all the other things. Then he says not only the body, but even the senses when you are alive is only attached towards material things. So he says none of these senses are telling me to. The eyes have a let's say mouth, right, for a taste. So this one is very clear, right? The mouth, you like something, you find it tasty, you then want to eat it. It's got a very specific purpose. He says there's no sense organ in my body which is reminding me constantly to think about you. Everything is serving different purposes towards material things. So he says, oh, please get me this opportunity to get disattached to the body so that I can put all these senses to use towards worshipping you. That's the key that he's saying here. So he may deha moham tyaja pavana puradhisha yat prema hetoho. So no comma in that line till the very end. Visarga at the very end. Prema hetoho and comma. Next line on top of that gehe, you remove the ir out. So gehe vitte kalatradishu cha vivashitaha. So that is there, remove it. Visarga and comma. Vivashitaha tvat padam vismaranti. Hi me deha moham tyaja pavana puradhisha yat prema hetoho gehe vitte kalatra dishu cha vivashitaha tvat padam vismaranti.
हि मे देहमोहं त्यज पवनपुराधीश यत्प्रेम हेतोः गेहे वित्ते कलत्रादिषु च विवशिताः त्वत्पदं विस्मरन्ति हि मे देहमोहं त्यज पवनपुराधीश यत्प्रेम हेतोः गेहे वित्ते कलत्रादिषु च विवशिताः त्वत्पदं विस्मरन्ति
हि मे देहमोहं त्यज पवनपुराधीश यत्प्रेमं हेतोः गेहे वित्ते कलत्रादिषु च विविशिताः त्वत्पदं विस्मरन्ति हि मे देहमोहं त्यज पवनपुराधीश यत्प्रेम हेतोः गेहे वित्ते कलत्रादिषु च विविशिताः त्वत्पदं विस्मरन्ति.
And the vismaranti is a short e at the very end, okay? So just be careful there. Soyam vannesh shuno va paramiha parataha, comma, sampratan chakshi karna. So sampratan chakshi karna, and then put a plus. Twag jihwadhya. So ig sound. Twag jihwadhya vikarshant yava shamata itaha, and then a comma. So one comma after paramiha parataha in the third line, then it flows continuously, and then after shamata itaha, comma, kopi na tvatpadabje. Soyam vanneshu no va paramiha paratah sampratan chakshikarna tvajjihvadhya vikarshanthyavashamata itah kopi na tvatpadabje.
सोऽयं वन्येषु नो वा परमिह परतः साम्प्रतं चाक्षिकर्णत्वग्जिह्वाद्या विकर्षन्त्यवशमत इतः कोऽपि न त्वत्पदाब्जे.
Kalpana, the third line last word, right? That sampratan in sound, because the nyas half word is there, letter is there. So in sampratan.
अच्छा, sorry. सोऽयं वन्येषु नो वा परमिह परतः साम्प्रतं चाक्षिकर्णत्वग्जिह्वाद्या विकर्ष्यन्तवशमत इतः कोऽपि न त्वत्पदाब्जे.
ராஜேஷ்
Hmm.
இது சோயம் வன்னே அதுக்கப்புறம் ஒரு விசர்கா இருக்கு வன்னே
Okay, visarga irundana put a ish to join it. Vannesh. Ish.
सोऽयं वह्निशशूनो वा परमिह परतः साम्प्रतं चाक्षिकर्णत्वग्जिह्वाद्या विकर्षन् यवशमत इतः कोऽपि न त्वत्पदाब्जे.
Angita, that word vanne shuno, I think you put an extra ish or sha somewhere. It's vannehe shuno, right? Two words. And then instead of the visarga, it's a ish. So it's vannesh shuno.
वह्नेश शुनो.
Yeah.
Okay, another. सोऽयं वह्नेषु नो वा परमिह परतः साम्प्रतं चाक्षिकर्णत्वग्जिह्वाद्या विकर्षन् यवशत् मत इतः कोऽपि न त्वत्पदाब्जे.
Okay, last Nansa. So all through here, again, he's been talking about body and senses and attachment to it. So then in the final stanza, he says, if you are not able to remove my attachment to the body now, because you may not be ready, right? You have to reach a level of maturity. So he says, okay, I want you to remove all this attachment I have to my body and senses. But if the time is not right, and if you think I'm not ready for the attachment to my body to go away right now, he says, that's fine. At least he says, do two things. One, he says, is you remove all my ailments and at least make me devoted to you completely, because he says I have attained this birth as a human, number one, right, which he said earlier is it's a big achievement that I've been born as a human. And then in his case he says that vipradeham, I have also attained this birth as a brahmin in this birth of mine, so I don't want to let this birth go to waste. So thanks first of all for giving me this opportunity, but I don't want this birth to go completely to waste. So he says, at least if you cannot remove my attachment, at least make me more devoted towards your feet, so I don't get distracted by all these other trivial sensuous pursuits. Right? With that, he ends this chapter. So durvaro deha moho yadi punaradhuna, comma, tarhi nishesha rogan, and then put a plus, hritva. So rogan hritva, eliminating my rogam, hritva, and then a comma, bhaktim dradishtham kuru tava pada pankeruhe pankajaksha.
Rajesh, sorry. And the tarhi nishesha rogana nishesha rog. I have a ra after the no, ni.
Nishesha rogan.
Nishesha, okay.
Yeah.
And then nishesha rogan kinda artha word another?
Hritva. You put a plus and then hritva in the next line.
I have a hatva. Okay, thank you.
Hatva could probably make meaning as well. Hatva is to kill it. Hritva is to get rid of it. So I guess either will be okay. But hritva is what book has it here. So.
Okay.
Durvaro deha moho yadi punaradhuna tarhi nishesha rogan hritva bhaktim dradishtham kuru tava pada pankeruhe pankajaksha.
दुर्वारो देहमोहो यदि पुनरधुना तर्हि निःशेषरोगान् हृत्वा भक्तिं दृढिष्टां कुरु तव पद पंकेरुहे पंकजाक्ष दुर्वारो देहमोहो यदि पुनरधुना तर्हि निःशेषरोगान् हृत्वा भक्तिं दृढिष्टां कुरु तव पद पंकेरुहे पंकजाक्ष
दुर्वारो देहमोहो यदि पुनरधुना तर्हि निःशेषरोगान् हृत्वा भक्तिं ददिष्टां कुरु तव पद पंकेरुहे पंकजाक्ष दुर्वारो देहमोहो यदि पुनरधुना तर्हि निःशेषरोगान् हृत्वा भक्तिं ददिष्टां कुरु तव पद पंकेरुहे पंकजाक्ष
नूनं नाना bhavante, comma, samadhi. So next word, samadhi ghata, some books had mamum, okay, but then we changed it to mimam because that's what majority of the books had. So samadhi gata mimam, if you have mamum then change it to mimam. Okay, samadhi gata mimam muktidam vipradeham, comma, क्षुद्रे हा हंत मामा क्षिप विषय रसे, कॉमा, पाहि मां मारुतेश. नूनं नाना भवान्ते समधिगतमिमं मुक्तिदं विप्रदेहं क्षुद्रे हा हंत मामा क्षिप विषय रसे पाहि मां मारुतेश.
नूनं नाना भवान्ते समधिगतमिमं मुक्तिदं विप्रदेहं क्षुद्रे हन्त मामाक्षिप विषयरसे पाहि मां मारुतेश. नूनं नाना भवान्ते समधिगतमिमं मुक्तिदं विप्रदेहं क्षुद्रे हन्त मामाक्षिप विषयरसे पाहि मां मारुतेश. श्री कृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः.
नूनं नाना भवान्ते समधिगतमिमं मुक्तिदं विप्रदेहं क्षुद्रे हन्त मामाशिप विषयरसे पाहि मां मारुतेश. नूनं नाना भवान्ते समधिगतमिमं मुक्तिदं विप्रदेहं क्षुद्रे हन्त मामाशिप विषयरसे पाहि मां मारुतेश. श्री कृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः.
We'll probably do a couple of stanzas of 94 and keep, otherwise it will take too much time. I won't go into the meaning, and like all these 90s chapters you all know are little bit hard chapters only. So first stanza, Shuddha Nishkama Dharmaihi, comma, Pravara Guru Gira Tat Swarupam Param Te, comma, Shuddham Dehendriyadi Vyapagatam Akhila. You can break at that ma. Vyapagatam Akhila Vyaptam Avedayante. So that whole line, second line is together. No pause. शुद्धा निष्काम धर्मैः प्रवर गुरुगिरा तत्स्वरूपं परं ते शुद्धं देहेन्द्रियादि व्यपगतमखिल व्याप्तमावेदयन्ते.
शुद्धा निष्काम धर्मैः प्रवर गुरुगिरा तत्स्वरूपं परं ते शुद्धं देहेन्द्रियादि व्यपगतमखिल व्याप्तमावेदयन्ते. शुद्धा निष्काम धर्मैः प्रवर गुरुगिरा तत्स्वरूपं परं ते शुद्धं देहेन्द्रियादि व्यपगतमखिल व्याप्तमावेदयन्ते.
शुद्धा निष्काम धर्मैः प्रवर गुरुगिरा तत्स्वरूपं परं ते शुद्धं देहेन्द्रियादि व्यपगतमखिलं व्याप्तमावेदयन्ते. शुद्धा निष्काम धर्मैः प्रवर गुरुगिरा तत्स्वरूपं परं ते शुद्धं देहेन्द्रियादि व्यपगतमखिल व्याप्तमावेदयन्ते. Ante. Sorry, Rajesh.
Yeah, that's okay.
All
Got
the
it.
marks are confusing, but I think I got it.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nanatva staulya karshyadi. So ir sound comes after the ka. Karshyadi tu, comma, gunaja vapus sangato dhyasitam. That word comes together. Sangato dhyasitam te, comma, vanner daru prabhedeshviva, comma, mahadhanuta deeptata shantatadi. That d at the very end is a short e, so shantatadi. नानात्वस्तौल्यकार्ष्यादितु गुणजवपुः सङ्गतो ध्यासितं ते वह्नेर्दारुप्रभेदेष्विव महदनुता दीप्तता शान्तताधि.
नानात्वस्तौल्यकार्ष्यादितु गुणज 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 वपु संगतो ध्यासितं ते वन्नेर् दारु प्रभेदेष्विव महदनुदा दीप्तता शान्ततादि. नानात्वस्तौल्यकार्ष्यादितु गुणज वपु संगतो ध्यासितं ते वन्नेर्दारु प्रभेदेष्विव महदनुता दीप्तता शान्ततादि.
नानात्वस्तौल्यकार्ष्यादितु गुणजवपुः सङ्गतो ध्यासितं ते वह्नेदारुप्रभेदेष्विव महदनुता दीप्तता शान्तदाति. नानात्वशौल्यकार्ष्यदितु गुणजवपुः सङ्गतो ध्यासितं ते वह्नेदारुप्रभेदेष्विव महदनुता दीप्तता शान्ततादि.
The second stanza is a little bit of a tough stanza. I'll try to break it as much as possible. Acharyakhya dharastharani samanumilach chishya rupotharara is there. So the entire line is together and then you put a plus. So rupotararan yavedhot goes, okay. So rupotararan in comes in the next slide. Rupotararan yavedhot bhasitena and then a comma. Sputa tara paribodhagnina dahyamane. आचार्याख्याधरस्तारणि समनुमिलच्छिष्यरूपोत्तरारण्यावेधोद्भासितेन स्फुटतरपरिबोधाग्निना दह्यमाने.
आचार्याख्यादरस्तारणि समनुमिलच्छिष्य रूपोत्तरारण्यावेधोद्भासितेन स्फुटतरपरिबोधाग्निना दह्यमाने. आचार्याख्यादरस्तारणि समनुमिलच्छिष्य रूपोत्तरारण्यावेधोद्भासितेन स्फुटतरपरिबोधाग्निना दह्यमाने.
आचार्याख्यादरस्तारणि समुनुमिलश्य रूपोत्तरारन् व्यावेदोपासितेन स्फुटतरपरिबोधाग्निना दह्यमाने. आचार्याख्यादरस्तारणि समुनुमिलश्य
Go ahead.
आचार्याख्यादरस्तारणि समुनुमिलचि शिक्ष्यरूपोत्तरारन् यावेदोद्भासितेन स्फुटतरपरिबोधाग्निना दह्यमाने.
कर्माली वासना तत् कृत तनु भुवन भ्रांति कांतार पूरे. So continuous and then a comma. Dahya bhavena vidya shikini cha virate, comma, tvanmayi khalvavastha. I'll just briefly explain this. I don't want to get too much into the meaning of this. He says, so when you have to create fire, he says you take you take two sticks, one on top, one at the bottom, and then you rub each other, right? So that's what results in the fire. So that fire, what it has the strength is, it has the strength to burn the entire forest out. And once the entire forest is burned, then the fire automatically stops. When there's nothing more left to burn, it stops, it extinguishes, right? So similarly, he says the acharya, the disciple, he says, are like the two sticks rubbing on each other. So when the acharya, the disciples, when the rubs on each other, knowledge that you actually get, that just like how, see, comparing it to the fire, just like how the fire is created by rubbing two sticks, knowledge is created here. And just like how that fire extinguishes the entire forest, this knowledge extinguishes all your past tendencies and karmas, everything that you have from previous births and everything, and all it can eradicate, that knowledge will eradicate everything. And just like how once the entire forest is burnt, the fire gets extinguished, similarly once all your other karma and vali and vasana, everything are extinguished with the knowledge, then you extinguishing here is compared to merging with the Lord himself. Then there's nothing more left for you to burn, then you eventually go and merge with the Lord. That's the example he's giving here. So karma, okay. कर्माल्हि वासना तत्कृतथनुभुवन भ्रान्तिकान्तारपूरे दाह्या भावेन विद्या शिकिनि च विरते त्वन्मयी खल्ववस्था.
कर्माली वासना तत्कृततनुभुवन भ्रान्तिकान्तारपूरे दाह्या भावेन विद्या शिकिनि च विरते त्वन्मयी खल्ववस्था. कर्माली वासना तत्कृततनुभुवन भ्रान्तिकान्तारपूरे दाह्या भावेन विद्या शिकिनि च दाह्या भावेन विद्या शिकिनि च विरते त्वन्मयी कल्ववस्था.
कर्माली वासना तत्कृततनुभुवन भ्रान्तिकान्तारपूरे दाह्या भावेन विद्या शिकिनि च विरते त्वन्मयी कल्ववस्था. कर्माली वासना तत्कृततनुभुवन भ्रान्तिकान्तारपूरे दाह्या भावेन विद्या शिकिनि च विरते त्वन्मयी कल्ववस्था.
We'll do one more and we'll stop. Evam tvat praptitonyo, comma, nahi khalu nikhila klesha hane rupayo, comma, naikantatyanti kaste, comma, krishi vadagada shadgunya shatkarma yogaha. Evam tvat praptitonyo nahi khalu nikila kleshahane rupayo naikantatyantikaaste krishi vadagada shadgunya shatkarma yogaha.
एवं त्वत्प्राप्तितोऽन्यो नहि खलु निखिल क्लेशहानेरुपायो नैकान्तात्यन्तिकास्ते कृषिवदगदषड्गुण्यषट्कर्मयोगाः. एवं त्वत्प्राप्तितोऽन्यो नहि खलु निखिल क्लेशहानेरुपायो नैकान्तात्यन्तिकास्ते षड्गुण्यषट्कर्मयोगाः.
Kalpana, this in the second line after kaste there is a pause, okay? Naikantatyanti kaste. Okay, it's a pause.
Evam त्वत्प्राप्तितोऽन्यो नहि खलु निखिल क्लेशहाने रूपायो नैकान्त्यान्तिकास्ते कृषिवदगद षड्गुण्यषट्कर्मयोगाः.
Sangeet, the second line, first word, naikantatyanti.
नैकान्तान्त्ययन् और
Naikantatyanti.
Oh, there's another ka there. Katyanti. Okay.
Yeah.
Evam tvat pratitonyo nahi kalu nikila kleshahane rupayo naikanta katya naikanta katyantikaste krishivadagadav shadgunya shatkarma yoga. Rajesh, sorry, one more time.
No.
Naikanta kat.
Naikan in. Okay, Naikan tat yanti.
Okay.
Got it?
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Durvai kalyair akalya. If you want to break it, you can break at that ra. So Durvai kalyair akalya api nigama pathaha. So that is there. Remove it. Visarga and a comma. That phalanyapya vapta, comma. Mattas tvam vismarantaha, comma. Prasajati patane yantyanantan vishadan. दुर्वैकल्यैरकल्या अपि निगमपथाः तत्फलान्यप्यवाप्ता मत्तास्त्वां विस्मरन्तः प्रसजति पतने यान्त्यनन्तान् विषादान्.
Rajesh, third line vyaptaha kadayada.
இல்ல என்னோட இல்ல some books have it has a vyaptaha. The individual word is vyaptaha only, but bookல இருக்குல இது. So
okay.
Yes.
दुर्वैकल्यैरकल्या अपि निगमपथाः तत्फलान्यप्यवाप्ता मत्तास्त्वां विस्मरन्तः प्रसजति पतने यान्त्यनन्तान् विषादान्. दुर्वैकल्यैरकल्या अपि निगमपथाः तत्फलान्यप्यवाप्ता मत्तास्त्वां विस्मरन्तः प्रसजति पतने यान्त्यनन्तान् विषादान्.
दुर्वैकल्यैरकल्या अपि निगमपताः तत्फलान्यप्यवाप्ता मत्तास्तां विस्मरन्तः प्रसजति पतने यान्त्यनन्तान् विषादान्. दुर्वैकल्यैरकल्या अपि निगमपताः तत्फलान्यप्यवाप्ता मत्तास्त्वां विस्मरन्तः प्रसजति पतने यान्त्यनन्तान् विषादान्.
We'll stop here. Shri Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha.
Rajesh, what is the name of the Dasakam for 93 and 94?
So 93 was the Pancha Vimshater, so 25. Pancha Vimshater Gurubhyaha, Gurus, 25 Gurus. Shikshaniyasya means the lessons. So it's you can English it's lessons from 25 Gurus. Sanskrit la Pancha Vimshater Gurubhyaha Shikshaniyasya Varnanam. That is 20.
இன்னொருல வந்து சதுர்விம்சத்தின்னு போட்டிருக்கு.
24 25 பஞ்சவிம்சத்தேர் தானே போட்டிருக்கு 25 தான் போட்டிருக்கு.
இல்ல இங்கிலீஷ்ல வந்து சதுர்விம்சதி குரவஹ அப்படினு போட்டிருக்கு.
That's okay. Gurava, that's okay. Gurubhyah. But Chaturvimshati, I'm surprised how it says Chaturvimshati instead of Panchavimshati.
In Telugu just says Guru Shiksha Varnanam.
Okay, all right. That's fine.
But we add all this.
சொல்றேல
Is it just you want English or Sanskrit?
ஏதோ பஞ்ச
Vimshater.
Tera.
Vimshater. So 25 Gurus. Pancha Vimshater. Gurubhyah. Shikshaniyasya. Teachings. Shikshaniyasya. Varnanam.
டைட்டிலே ஒரு ஸ்லோகமா இருக்கு ராஜேஷ்.
அதான் நினைச்சேன் தசகமா இருக்கு 10.5 தசகமா நினைச்சேன்.
Then 94 Dasakam 94 English is it says means of enlightenment. That's the title, means of enlightenment. And if you want it in Sanskrit, tattva jnana utpatti, tattva jnanotpatti, tattva jnanotpatti prakara varnanam. So about tattvam and jnanam utpatti, to raise your tattvam and jnanam. That's what it is. Tattva jnanotpatti prakara varnanam.
Thank you.
Okay. सान्ध्रानन्दावबोधात्मकमनुपमितं कालदेशावदिभ्यां निर्मुक्तं नित्यमुक्तं निगमशतसहस्रेण निर्भास्यमानम् अस्पष्टं दृष्टमात्रे पुनरुरुपुरुषार्थात्मकं ब्रह्मतत्त्वं तत्तावद्भाति साक्षात् गुरुपवनपुरे हन्त भाग्यं जनानाम् कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना भा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि.